Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Theresa Melito-Conners, PhD. She is the founder of Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret, a suite of theater-inspired self-care and professional development services. So much to learn. What a cool conversation. Thanks for listening. And by the way, it'd be so cool if you would go to my website, stephenmiletto.com/reviews, and left a review for the podcast. Could you do that for me? You know, another way you could do it would be by going to the app that you're listening to me on and go find the podcast artwork, then go down through the episodes, and there at the bottom you'll find a place to leave some star ratings. You know, that'd be awesome if you wanted to give me a 5-star rating. Huh? Cool. Could you do that? Or as well as leave a review about the podcast. That's how we get found in podcast land, and it would be so cool if you did that for me. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Melito. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. With Dr. Steve Melito.
Theresa Melito-Conners, PhD, or Dr. MC, is the founder of Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret, a suite of theater-inspired self-care and professional development services for helping professionals. The Self-Care Cabaret encompasses workshops, a podcast, and educational curricula focused on accessible, realistic strategies that equip and empower. Dr. MC first recognized the need for such strategies in her early days as a special education administrator. She realized individuals in people-first, service-oriented roles often struggle with prioritizing self-care and work-life balance and lack resources. Curious, Dr. MC pursued her PhD in educational leadership from Lesley University, honing in on self-care and renewal for helping professionals. In addition to her doctorate and published research, Theresa is a licensed K12 counselor with a Master's of Education in School Counseling from Salem State University and a BA in Theater Studies from Emerson College. Her true joy is bringing her scholarship, experience, and zest to audiences of all kinds nationwide. Dr. MC has a growing social community at Dr. MC Self-Care on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and lives in Massachusetts. Theresa, glad to have you on the show. Say hi to everyone.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm excited to be here. Hi, everyone.
Well, glad to have you here. It's awesome to talk with you. And I gotta ask you, I mean, you have this big theater background. I mean, what was it that you really liked about that world?
Oh, goodness. I do have a big theater background. So I started dancing when I was about 3 years old, which was many years ago at this point. And, I performed all through growing up and decided to pursue it, possibly professionally through my undergraduate studies at Emerson College. And, I found that world just didn't really, it was magical, but it also was not as sustaining and not as stable as I think I was looking for. So, I mean, what I love most about it is the magic that happens, the creativity that happens, and the community that emerges. It's a really tight-knit community when you work in theater, and you end up just making these incredible bonds with people throughout, moving from show to show or doing different choreography, which I had done, meeting amazing people, and just that, it was just awesome.
That's cool. So did you have a particular part or type of part that you liked?
Oh, anything. The dancing roles where I could sing and dance and act. So my first starring role was in the musical version of Fame, where I played Carmen Diaz, who's the lead in Fame.
Very nice. Very cool. Awesome. I love that. That's, one of the things that I've got a couple chances to go to New York and see a couple off-Broadway and on-Broadway performances. And my all-time favorite was I got to see Cats at the Winter Garden Theater. My wife and I went there, and she loves cats. So I was like, this will be good, because I'd heard the music and thought it'd be good. It was way beyond good.
It's spectacular. I mean, the whole thing.
Oh, yes. And they'd been in that Winter Garden Theater for so long that they had all these trap doors and all kinds of special effects and all kinds of things. And that was incredible.
That's an experience for sure. And that one, I mean, you had to learn a whole dance style to be in the musical Cats. They really embody all the movements of cats.
They sure did. And it was just something else. It's like, you just kind of had to let go of reality for a while. And it was easy because, those performers were, I'd be a little concerned because they probably were walking around now with little...
meowing and doing cat-like things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I've always had
I'm sure it's hard to break out of that for sure. And the costumes in that and makeup are spectacular too.
It was insane. It was awesome. So good stuff. But that's so cool that that's your world. And I think that's so awesome. So, you're a K-12 licensed counselor. What has been something that impacted you the most from being in that field?
Yeah, so completely switching channels, right? It
Yes,
feels like.
yes.
So I don't currently work as a licensed counselor, but I do have that credential and I have worked in that world. And it's still very much part of the underpinnings of the Self-Care Cabaret as well. I would think for me, that role really emphasized the importance of mental health, because I worked in a therapeutic high school with students with a variety of social emotional challenges and mental health challenges. And although I loved the work, it just really highlighted the importance of mental health, the lack of resources and understanding around mental health. And really, that's actually how my interest in self-care emerged, through being in that role.
Oh, that's cool. So that's what I was kind of wondering, because you kind of have a combination here of the theater and the counselor part of you, and your program's called Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret, and so what made you say that this is what I got to do? Because it's cool. And did it have like other things where you said, nah, that name doesn't work. Oh, that name doesn't work. Whoa, maybe.
I wanted to be Dr. MC's something, because I thought it was really cool when I was earning my PhD. I thought having that honor to be distinguished as doctor is pretty cool. I still think that. Cool. And I thought Dr. MC, because my name being Melito-Conners, I thought, I like that, Dr. MC. It's very theatrical. And, Dr. MC's self-care something, like self-care what? Self-care corner, self-care this. Like, I did go back and forth, and my husband actually helped me come up with the name. And when he said Self-Care Cabaret, it was one of those moments that, like, the spotlights went on and I heard bells ringing, and I knew that was it, because it really encompasses me and brings kind of my theater expertise and my energy and my enthusiasm and kind of wraps it all up in a nice little bow, I think, anyway. Very cool.
Very cool. So, and I was just wondering, because, with the, as you're trying to figure something out and it works, it's a nice thing, and it's different too, which is different. Cool. And so I didn't know if, like, hopefully this comes out right. As a theater person, did you celebrate? Do you have a way that you talk once in a while and say, I think this is it, or I don't know,
There might have been some dramatic moments afterwards. No, and it really, though, it was a way, at first, I just wanted a way to share with folks the importance of self-care. And it's still, that is kind of the root of it all, just wanting to share this knowledge and help people, especially helping professionals, practice better self-care and really understand what the meaning is, the true meaning of self-care. So through my own kind of lived experience and journey, and then my doctoral research, realizing this is a big problem, and how am I going to share this information? So I needed a name for what started as a little Facebook page back about 2019, and it has really blossomed into something amazing, and it continues to grow.
Very cool. And I told you before we started recording, I'm now a subscriber to your podcast, and good information, good stuff. So we're going to get into that too in just a second. And and one of the things I want to remind you is my audience is educators and parents of all backgrounds and job descriptions. And in recent times, much has been said about burnout and being overwhelmed. Could you talk about the importance of understanding self-care to combat these feelings?
Yeah, a lot of that comes from society. society doesn't reward us when we use our vacation days or our paid time off. As a matter of fact, it makes us feel guilty about doing these things. So a lot of my work is centered around kind of dismantling those misconceptions around self-care and really teaching folks that it can be little things, it can be small shifts that you make in your routine, but we're not talking about mani-pedis here at the Self-Care Cabaret. We're talking about how you feed yourself, how you move your body, how you soothe your body, how you rest, the relationships that you have. Like, it's really a robust framework to look at several different domains and then really pick and choose. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, but figuring out where yours are and then seeing what you can do about it so that you show up as the best you possible.
I love that. Love it. You're so right. There's no really, I mean, the interesting reward you get for if you take a day to yourself is that you come back to whatever you come back to.
Right.
Which is like, it's a little bothersome to think about some of it sometimes that you go, yeah, maybe I won't take any day,
Yeah, it almost becomes worse. But a lot of that is too, when we look at our self-care and how we're currently practicing or what we're not doing or where we have areas of weakness, it's also a lot about boundaries. Like, are there things you can offload? Like, what are you saying yes to that is draining your energy? And how can you shift that and begin to make yourself the priority? Because self-care is really other care. So if you take care of yourself first, it's like magic. It does allow you to better care for others.
That's very cool. So I'm about to tell you a story, and I'm a storyteller. Kids used to say, now I am grandpa age, but in those days when I wasn't, they used to say, you're like my grandpa.
I love stories.
But, all right. So as a teacher, one of the things I learned was that principals needed you to do things, right? And so I went in with the idea of, I'd say, what you need help with, right? And as a result of that, that's how now in the Army, I learned how to play soccer, and I was a soccer goalie and did some things there. And that's how I got to help coach goalies in the soccer programs and had fun there. But the one that's in your world is at one school, I said that, and the principal looked at me and he said, well, we haven't had theater here in 15 years. And I went, whoa, 15 years. I think I can do better than not 15 years. And so I went to my friends who did different work at some different professional theaters and stuff. And I said, I need some help. And thanks to a media specialist who helped me, because this school had one of these old stages that are built in the cafeteria.
Oh, a cafetorium?
Yes, exactly.
We have some of those up here in Massachusetts.
Yes, exactly.
My high school had a cafetorium. We did have a theater space, but it was technically in the middle school.
Well, this school did not have one of those. It had the cafetorium, and that's where you use. And I had to build. I had a closet that I was able to make mine for the event, and we had some lights installed and stuff to bring it up to actually do some fun stuff like this, and did all kinds of cool things. And I actually met a physics professor a physics teacher who had been at the school forever, and he said, "Hey," he goes, "a long time ago, I built a light box for the theater group." He goes, "Did you find that?" And I said, "Well, no, there's not anything that." He said, "Well, let me look around." Well, he had this thing. I guess whoever it was gave it back to him, and so he had it in a closet, and he gave it to me.
Oh my goodness!
Now this was don't think professional light,
Oh, no, I've done enough community theater and school productions to know what you're talking about.
Okay. So what he did was he had built something with house dimmers, right? And so like the type you have in your house. Now, it was really cool, but I learned something very valuable that he didn't think to tell me about, which was, so I'm doing rehearsal one afternoon, and we power up all the lights. We've gotten these new lights, got them installed and stuff, thanks to the media specialist who lent me part of her budget, because all I had when I inherited the group was $50.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're lucky you had that much.
Yes. And powered that all up, blew out all the lights in the south end of the school. The power, everything went out. And all these people going, anybody know what happened to the lights? Nothing worked. Yeah, so...
Whoops!
I had fun in that. That was a blast.
That's
awesome. It's that guy Melito who's trying to get theater
What's
going.
He doing in there with the kids?
Yeah, exactly. Boom. So
got everybody's attention.
Oh, definitely got everybody's. Attention, yes. I had a habit of doing stuff like that. It's a funny thing because learned a lot about working with people. But and working with kids and working with other adults, because I depended a lot on reaching out to people and saying, "Hey, can you help me? Can you help me?" And I guess I was pitiful enough that many of them would say, "Oh, how can I resist telling him yes?" So, and so I'd get people, and I spent a lot of. Theater takes time. If you're going to produce a show and you're going to work and you're going to do all the blocking and all kinds of stuff, and and especially when you got kids who have really no theater background, and you're trying to help them, and this guy who has no theater background trying to help them be theater people. And where I was going with that is that after a while you start going, I'm spending a lot of time on the club, which I get paid about $700 for the entire year to do. Spread out across 12 checks. Yeah. And not as much time on my classes that's what I'm hired to teach. And, that type of thing kind of wears on you. And, and it's interesting because even though I had fun, it was great doing it, because we also had to do fundraisers, and you got to paint the sets, and you got to build the sets, because we did everything. And, it's self-care is an interesting thing. And back in those days, I just thought, well, it'll all pass. We'll figure this out. But you see now a lot of, people that don't understand to take those breaks. So that was a long story to get to the point that I can imagine with talking about and teaching about self-care, that you have some topics that kind of come back up. In a minute, we're going to get to a few of the types of some of the presentations that you do. But you've spoken to many organizations. Could you talk about some of the more popular or most requested topics that they want you to address? What are they really asking for?
Self-care comes up a lot. And really, I think since COVID-19, since the pandemic kind of started, it really highlighted the emphasis that the way things were going weren't working. And for a lot of people, facing burnout and stress, and COVID has actually exacerbated that in a lot of ways. And I feel like people, though, are beginning to realize, hey, my health actually matters. My work-life balance actually matters. And I need to really take control of this. So that's been kind of great, because I get to teach a lot of people about self-care and work-life balance and stress management. Another topic that is really popular is trauma-sensitive classrooms and trauma recovery, and helping, educators learn how to work with students who have been impacted by trauma. And as we're seeing more, at least in my work, I'm seeing an increase of students impacted by trauma. And I believe that is, kind of across the board that folks are seeing that. So the student needs are increasing, and teachers really need the skills and need the tools to help those students, to teach all students, of course, but particularly those impacted by trauma can be rather tricky.
I can only imagine, most definitely. And, it's something that we're more and more aware of. I was talking with a gentleman recently who's a psychiatrist, and he was talking about, by the way, not to imply that, not that there's anything wrong with getting therapy. But,
no, I'm a huge proponent of therapy.
Yes, I kind of thought about the way I just said that. It's like, he is a friend of mine. Yes, there's. Hey, doctor, let me tell you about this friend of mine. Never mind. I'm really getting off the beaten path there. I was just talking with him about, in the past, I guess kind of in our society was kind of this feeling that you just don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And do you kind of struggle sometimes with those who think that I need to tell you something versus those who, feel like they should just keep it in them?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's definitely, that kind of mentality. But I don't think it's not helping anybody, not talking about these things. Like, we have to, work to destigmatize mental health and understand that everybody has struggles, and that it's okay to ask for help and to lean on your communities, or take a break, or, shift your narrative so you're putting yourself first. It's more than okay. It's kind of critical to our survival that we really take this position and prioritize ourselves.
Gotcha. It's just an interesting thing, because I think that, that's a major shift in how we think about that.
Yeah. Even during my doctoral research, I was studying self-care and renewal for leaders and teachers and how they need to practice it, but also promote it for their teachers, and then their teachers practice it and promote it for their students. And this can really impact student achievement. It really has profound impact. And some of the leaders, it was really funny in some of my interviews, were like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, ask my teachers if they slept good? I'm like, well, you could maybe create a culture where it's okay to talk about certain things. You don't have to be all awkward about it. But really, making that okay. And, sometimes leaders are all like, oh, I am in tune with what my teachers need and this, that, and the other thing. Yet they have an expectation and set a culture that, you should respond to emails after hours. You are expected to do all these additional things, or, you can just tell when a culture in a school, if like the vibe is supportive or if it's not. And sometimes often actions speak louder than words. So, you can't on one hand say that you have your teacher's best interest at heart, and then in the next hand create this culture that doesn't support that makes teachers feel bad about taking time off or using personal days or taking a sick day. It just, those two things don't work, but it's hard. It's hard to do that.
It really is. I mean, that's an interesting thing there, especially as a note when there are forces or powers that be that do, kind of frown on the fact that you are encouraging your staff to take time off, because it's like, who's going to be
100%.
Who's going to be with the kids? It's like, and so that in itself causes its own issues. So let's talk about a few of the topics that you and presentations that you do. Like one of them, you have a presentation titled "The Power of Developing and Promoting Your Growth Mindset." So what's growth mindset and why is it important?
Yeah, I love growth mindset. So this comes from Dr. Carol Dweck's kind of revolutionary research on growth versus fixed mindset. So with a growth mindset, basically you understand that abilities can be developed. It might take hard work, it might take some failure, trial and error, whatever you want to call it, but that someone's true potential is unknown and unknowable. So you get people that maybe, if we think about, some of the greatest people in history, and we really think about their story, Muhammad Ali comes to mind. Nobody thought Muhammad Ali was going to amount to anything, and look, he's an icon. And there's a lot of them. Christopher Reeve, Superman. He actually, after that tragic accident, he worked so hard, he ended up reshaping some of the science that goes along with his healing process. And he surpassed anyone's expectations for what he would be able to do after that accident. And there's a lot of athletes, definitely exhibit a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, whereas people believe that, intelligence and talent, these are just like fixed traits, and that even if you were to spend time working on them, you're not going to be able to improve or them to get any better.
Gotcha. So, and it's one of those things that in, education, one of the things we try and do, outside education, one of the things, the message to parents is to try and help them understand those as well. Well, just as much as they need to understand it in working with their children, we sometimes have to think of ourselves and as, a different type of children, but as educators that we need to understand some of this too. And so I would think that I can understand why this would be a topic that people would want you to talk about. What are they hoping what are you hoping to deliver? What's that message that you really want them to take away from when you talk about growth mindset?
One of the important things that I always think of, or maybe like an easy way to kind of remember, we all have bits of growth and fixed mindset, but some people tend to swing more towards fixed versus more towards growth in some areas and in different areas. But you can work to develop more of a growth mindset. And actually research shows that the view you adopt for yourself actually profoundly affects the way you lead your life. So if you are always kind of that negative fixed mindset that you're not ever going to get any better, or things are just kind of the way they are, that's going to impact how you lead your life. Versus what the research shows about people with a growth mindset, in that they tend to be more resilient when they face setbacks or obstacles or challenges. So I try to really stress that with folks, especially when we kind of layer it on top of self-care, because everything always comes back to self-care with me. So you have to, if you look at that, and then we kind of layer self-care onto it, you have a lot of control over how you show up in the world and your health and well-being.
That's so awesome because just a note, I had a chance to go a couple of times to go fishing in Alaska to catch king salmon. And
cool.
It was. and not only was the experience of catching the fish cool, but just the experience of where we were, because you had to take a float plane into this river and you went to a camp and you stayed in this camp. And, there's, this is a dated reference, but I grew up on old TV shows. No phone, no lights, no motor cars, type of thing. Do you know where that's from?
I don't actually. And I know a lot of old TV shows. I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, I guess just sit right back and I hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. And if I keep singing, you're going to go, I still don't get it. Man.
No, was it Gilligan's Island?
Yes, there it is.
Right. No, I was going to guess that, but that really wasn't one. All right, if you had done I Love Lucy or like Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie, I'd have been right there with you from the beginning.
Gotcha. So anyway, there's the only power they had out there was for the generators, and they were for the generators to run the freezers and the ice chests and the stuff for how they cook this food and save the fish and stuff like this. But to be where there's no connectivity. Your phone does not work. There is no Wi-Fi. There is nothing. And there were no people out there, and except for the people of the fish camp. And to stop and look around and see, I was in elementary school in the early 70s, and there was a big push in those days to try and figure out how to save the American bald eagle, because they were using pesticides in those days that were getting into the fish and stuff like this, and the birds were eating them, and of course that was killing their young, and so it was a cool thing to be out there, and there's bald eagles everywhere. They're literally everywhere, and you see them,
awesome.
And they're constantly flying. I saw babies and stuff like this, and it's just being in that environment itself. Talk about self-care. It was like,
I was gonna say, it sounds really soothing for your nervous system to like just be in that disconnected environment.
It was, especially because when I told people at work, I said, I'll be gone. I'll contact you when I get to Anchorage. Once I leave Anchorage, you will not be able to talk to me anymore. There is no, yeah, Steve, just connect your phone. No, I'll be gone for those number of days. And that in itself was rejuvenating.
No, absolutely.
So just a note, I gotta say that's very helpful. If you ever had a thought of it, just getting away, that's one of the ways of doing it, especially when you don't have to deal with traffic or any of that sort of stuff. So, So in the description of the presentation, the intersection of trauma, resilience, and self-care, you note this. In theater, in the round refers to a performance where an actor can see three sides of an audience. They're spaces that foster deep connection and trust. In the same way, service professionals are uniquely positioned to help others overcome challenges and build resilience. Could you talk about your focus here?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite presentations. So if you look at the research on trauma, we know what trauma is. Trauma, deeply distressing, disturbing experience. We don't have to go into more detail than that, but so you have a traumatic event. Well, what researchers and experts tell us that the best way to overcome trauma is by building resilience. And resilience is thought to be something that isn't extraordinary, meaning you can build resilience. It isn't something that like some people have and some people don't. So if we look at trauma and we look at resilience, and we know that resilience helps us to overcome or bounce back from our trauma, we can look at kind of the main components and what the research tells us about how to build resilience. And the main ways are connection, so making sure you have connection to other people, to resources and whatnot. Healthy thinking, so that gets into our mindset, our growth mindset. Meaning, so making sure that we just feel like our life has meaning and purpose, and that we're really filling up kind of that domain of our lives. And then overall wellness. So those are the 4 ways that help us kind of build resilience. Well, if you layer that over the 10 domains of self-care, I briefly mentioned in the beginning that there's several domains of self-care. If we start to kind of look at those, they intersect very, very well with resilience. So by nature of practicing self-care, you're building your own resilience. So it's going to help you promote it to others, which in turn will help you get over your trauma that maybe you've experienced, but also that for your students. So again, another vote and another plug for self-care. And really the in the round concept, all of my workshops have kind of theater inspired titles and different things as we kind of incorporate all of that messaging into the Self-Care Cabaret and in what that is. So that was kind of a way to just explain the intersection of those 3 elements.
Oh, I love it. Works beautifully. I
thought so.
You're so right. It works really well. It's so good stuff. I mean, so I've got to ask you. All right, so we're kind of getting close to finishing up here, and so if you had a chance to be a closing speaker at a conference of school principals, now it's important who you're talking to, right?
School principals
who are getting ready to start the new school year. What would be something that you would want to make sure that they remember from your talk?
I would want to emphasize a couple of things. First, a reminder that self-care is other care. This is not selfish. You have to put your needs first. And especially as leaders, you need to practice self-care and promote it for others. I would also encourage them to consider the system of oppression that exists within education. It is a tough job to work in education. And there's lots of top-down pressure, and there's constantly new initiatives and new things. So I would stress to the school principals to make sure that they understand that they can set the culture within their schools to either promote self-care and well-being for their staff or not. And hopefully they choose to promote it. And that by doing that, they can actually help to dismantle some of the systemic pressures that exist in the field of education. It's a phenomenal field. It's so inspiring and so amazing, but it can be so tough.
You're so right. I one of the things that you made me think of is I had a couple of principals who were mentors to me who I worked with them at different times, and they used to say things, although they didn't know each other and they weren't in the same building nor in the same school system. They used to say similar things like, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes we feel illness coming on, and which means that you should take advantage and make sure that you, go ahead and go home or not come to work for a day and, get yourself better. And, hint, hint, just fill out that form now and take that break. All right. And which I always thought was cool because it was kind of like, even though it was a hint, hint, wink, wink, I'd rather you go while you're still feeling okay, but, you could use a break as opposed to, you've really in suffering a little bit and need more than just a break. So that was cool. So good stuff. You want to tell them. I'm a former high school principal, and there's sometimes we get accused of thinking only one way or not paying attention to people and stuff like that. So that's why I asked you what it would be like to talk to that group.
It's a hard job and it's difficult, and I appreciate how challenging it is, but I also want to inspire and encourage folks to realize though they have some power here.
Love it. So tell us how a school or school district or other organization could engage to get you to talk with their teams.
Yeah, I'd love that. So you can head over to my website, drmcselfcare.com. I have a contact page there. You can also see lots of other interesting information and poke around. But right on the contact page is a way you can message me and talk about the potential of setting up a presentation, or just send me a note, say hello, or other general inquiries, whatever you want. But that's probably the easiest way.
Very cool. And I will have information about your page in my your webpage in my show notes. Do you hang out in any social media or anything like that?
I do. Very active on social media, primarily Instagram and Facebook at Dr. MC Self-Care. So that's DRMC Self-Care. And also on LinkedIn under Theresa Melito-Conners, or there is a Dr. MC Self-Care Cabaret page. And the podcast is on all major platforms under the business name of Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret.
Very cool, and it's very informative. Listened to a lot of your episodes now, so good stuff. Looking forward to the next one. And I will put all that information in my show notes so it's easy to find, especially you guys listening on the phones. You just go to that page and boom, you can click and be right there. So
awesome.
Good stuff. So, Theresa, I got 2 more questions to ask you, and these are just questions I like to ask my guests. And the first one goes like this. How do you keep going when so much is going on that you want to quit?
Yeah. So if you're feeling like you want to quit, that's a cue that it's time to take a step back and not quit necessarily, but reevaluate what it is that you got going on. Where can you create more space? What are maybe some commitments that you've said yes to that you're like, oh, man, wish I didn't do that you can get yourself out of, honestly. I mean, there's no shame in saying, oh, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm so sorry. I thought I could do that, but I can't. And really considering your boundaries and maybe even strengthening your boundaries if you're finding that there's some things that are draining your energy. But it's really a cue to start tuning in and figure out why you're feeling that way and how you can shift that.
Excellent. Love it. And last question. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
Oh, goodness. Well, expressing gratitude is actually an important self-care practice. So let's see. I've been blessed to have many phenomenal educators throughout my education. But one that comes to mind was my junior year pre-calculus teacher. Math has really never been my thing. And unfortunately, I had some maybe not great teachers along the way that I missed some of those foundational pieces. And although I managed to stay in honors classes and I did extra credit till I was exhausted from it and was always willing to do extra, there's that growth mindset. But, I got to junior year in high school and was really struggling. And I would stay after school with Mrs. Hatch. And I remember her saying to me one day, you just missed some of the foundations. Once we get you the foundational pieces, you're going to be just fine. And sure enough, after a short period of time, I was in the top of the class. And then I would stay after school so I could help other students, still hanging out with her. But I really didn't need the extra help anymore because I had gotten that little gap somewhere along the way that I had missed. So she really helped me and just furthered that growth mindset in that I could be a math student and a successful one.
That is awesome. I love it. Thanks for sharing that story. Theresa, it's so cool talking with you today. I mean, what an incredible focus you have. I love Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret. What a cool website. All kinds of good information there. And you got so many cool talks that you have with people. And got to make sure, listeners, you go to Theresa's podcast. Awesome stuff. Wishing you the best in all you do.
Thank you so much. You too.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.